And we have some breaking news now for you in our world lead. In the wake of the president's announcement to withdraw U.S. troops from Syria, multiple sources tell me that the Trump administration officials are now bracing for President Trump to soon announce with the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan. Those sources warn that the president has not yet made any final decision on the matter. Right now, there are roughly 14,000 American troops in Afghanistan. Joining me now to talk about this breaking news, as well as the news about Syria, is retired four-star General John R. Allen. He helped lead the fight against ISIS under President Obama as a special presidential envoy for the global coalition to counter ISIS. General, thanks so much for being here. What do you make of this? People throughout the Trump administration, especially in the military, prepared and frankly concerned that President Trump is going to make the same announcement about Afghanistan that he made about Syria.
Well, it's going to be a real crisis for us, Jake. We've got coalition obligations there. The Afghan people have depended on us for some period of time to help them to be prepared ultimately to deal with the Taliban over a long period, to make peace, to create a credible system of government there, to get the economy on its feet again. Pulling out right now, just the announcement would create chaos within the strategy. So we need to be very, very careful about how we announce this.
All right. So that has not yet been announced. And like I said, the president has not made a final decision. People are just bracing themselves for it. The Syria announcement has come.
That's right.
How would you characterize, what do you think of the president's decision to announce that he wants all U.S. troops in Syria back in the United States?
Well, look, we all thought at one point that they would come home. But a precipitous departure of our troops could create a military disaster. In Afghanistan, in Syria. Look, it has the net effect of turning the war over and turning our leverage over to Bashar al-Assad and to Vladimir Putin. It will empower, I believe, the Iranians, and the administration has talked about ensuring that they check Iranian movements throughout the region. When it empowers the Iranians, and that strengthens the Bashar al-Assad regime, which creates a pass-through for weapons to Hezbollah, which threatens our Israeli allies. It undercuts our allies on the ground. It undercuts the Kurds, who we realize, and you and I talked about this on this show once before, we found the Kurds to be reliable partners. An American strategy at that time was to empower indigenous forces, and we did that. And we defeated the Islamic State in many respects in that part of Syria. But there's still a very volatile force at that particular moment, at this particular moment there.
So what happens if the U.S. does, I mean, they are. The U.S. military is going to withdraw the troops. He's the commander-in-chief.
Sure.
What then will happen? Will we see villages that normally there are people? I mean, you
well, sure.
Me.
Well, look, this is what we know from the regime. When the regime ultimately takes charge of a village or a population center that stood against the regime, the retaliation is almost immediate. And the deaths and the retaliation and the retribution are enormous as the regime metes out punishment against those people that oppose the regime. Russian firepower is used indiscriminately. We can expect that the Russians will provide firepower and immediately attack those centers of resistance that we have created. There's no telling what the Turks will do. We hope that some part of the conversation of the president with Erdogan was that the United States would hold the Turks responsible for treating the liberated populations of northeast Syria with some level of humanity. But there's no telling what the Turks will do. We hope that they won't retaliate against those groups. But by pulling the rug out from under and abandoning our Kurdish and Syrian allies, it also strikes a blow on American credibility in the region. Part of our strategy in the future in dealing with these kinds of threats is to empower the indigenous populations, to train them. Yet here we do. Here we have empowered this population. We have given them the capabilities to deal with ISIS. Now we're in the process of stabilizing that population so ISIS doesn't backflash in our faces and their faces. But at the very moment they need us the most, we're pulling out.
So I want to ask you about something that was extraordinary. It was a video released by the White House yesterday, President Trump defending his decision. And he did so by invoking American soldiers and troops, service members who had been killed fighting ISIS. Take a listen.
They're all coming back, and they're coming back now. We won, and that's the way we want it, and that's the way they want it.
So I first off, I'm struck by the "we won" language, but then also I've never seen a president or even a general or any public official talk about what KIA service members would want. As somebody who served, who has...
Yeah, it's stunning, Jake. Look, our magnificent troops have served overseas year after year after year, dealing with these real threats to American national security. And many of them have given the last full measure of their devotion. They have paid with their lives. Their families have paid in a very substantial way. To politicize that sacrifice, to support that decision, I think is very wrong-headed, frankly.
President Trump tweeted this morning, quote, "It's time for others to finally fight." I want to play for you some of the reaction from Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, who's with you and disagrees with this decision.
Sure.
If you do not want to fight this war alone, how do you justify leaving Syria at a time when those who helped us, the Kurds, are certain to be overwhelmed and slaughtered? And if we do this to the Kurds, who's going to help us fight in the future?
So President Trump's response to that and to Graham's opposition in general is, I can't believe Lindsey Graham wants more troops to die and more money to be wasted. I'm paraphrasing, but that was essentially what he said. What's your response to the president?
Well, Lindsey Graham is absolutely correct on this, and the president ought to listen to Lindsey Graham rather than criticize Lindsey Graham on this issue. And what has not had a lot of play here, beyond the fact that we should be every day thanking our magnificent troops for their sacrifices all around the world to keep the enemy at bay from the United States and our coalition, is the coalition itself. The previous administration, the U.S. leadership, Obama leadership, called for a global coalition. Over 70 nations answered that call. Did we consult with any of them before we made this decision? Probably not. I know a lot of our coalition partners are deeply concerned about this decision. And so if the United States wants to be able to empower indigenous forces for the next war, they're going to think twice about putting their future in our hands only to have us abandon them at the moment of their greatest need. And a global coalition will think twice about coming to help the United States if we need to in a great emergency, because they know we won't consult with them when the time comes. So the president ought to listen to Lindsey Graham rather than criticize him.
General John G. Allen, thank you so much. Appreciate your time, sir, and your service as always.
Thank you, Jake.